All right, in this video, I am going to um, talk with you about basically adding variable costs to your revenue estimates. This is where, quite frankly, I think what we do from a financial perspective sometimes really diverges from what you learned in accounting classes. Remember from what we talked about before, businesses run on cash and we value them and make the determinations based on cash. So while some of what I am doing will look very similar to what you might see in, say, an income statement, there will be points where it doesn't exactly match up. And feel free to ask any questions if there's some reason that you don't understand about that. But basically, what we're focused on here is how much money we're going to spend in cash. So think of it almost as cash accounting, as opposed to sort of the traditional accrual accounting, and that's what we'll focus on. So the first thing that we're going to focus on in terms of, we've already got the sort of the sales side of it. Now we're focused on the money that we're going to spend on that, and we're going to break that down into variable costs, period costs, and then taxes. I think from the discussions we had earlier in the class, hopefully you remember that variable costs are costs that you incur more or less on a per unit basis with the stuff that you sell. Now, in this example, which is a restaurant example, the food and beverage costs very clearly are per unit. Direct labor costs, you think about cooks, wait staff, that sort of thing. Maybe not an exact mapping of that, but quite frankly, the way that they are managed inside of a restaurant really makes them fit that direct cost much better, or variable cost much better, because quite frankly, what most well-run restaurants will do is develop a forecast of kind of by day of the week or even shift in a day what they think their sales are going to be, and they have a target direct labor percentage, and they basically try and put that schedule together so that they maintain the amount of labor consistent with that. So it's not always perfect from the standpoint of giving good customer service and so forth, but from a management standpoint, it works well. And in good restaurants, they've left enough slack there that they can make that work. So for our restaurant, what we're going to do is we are going to start out with using 25% for food and beverage costs as an average. So for every dollar spent, 25 cents of that will go to the actual food or beverage that it's spent on, and 25% on direct labor costs. If you, I know this because my family has experience in the restaurant industry, but if you were to go out and do internet research, you would find that these are believable ranges, and they're certainly in a range that you can manage to. Since we're building this as a dynamic model, if at some point we decide that we don't like these percentages, we can change them, and it should change everything else in the model. So we'll go ahead and highlight those since those are assumptions and just plug them right on in there. And they are a direct reflection of the amount of food sold. So it simply is whatever our revenue estimate is here. And I'm going to go ahead and, because I'm going to reuse this formula, I'm going to put a dollar sign to line the same, times whatever my percentage is. In this case, we need to lock in the column for that, so we'll put a dollar sign there. So you can see what that comes out to. And we're going to want that to be, I'm just going to go ahead and hide the pennies, not because maybe they aren't important, but it helps with space and so forth, quite frankly, on these. So you'll see that because of the way that I put the formula together with the dollar signs, I now have the direct labor referencing D28 again, which is the amount that we need. And it's picking up C33, which is the percentage for direct labor. You can't tell that, but if we were to say, oh, let's just make our food cost 28%, you can see the numbers change on one and not the other, and so that would be a way to evaluate that. So once we have those, we'll drag that over, and it's changing because the amount of sales are changing, so that's a good sign. And because it is truly direct to sales, we don't have to make any adjustments from when we go from monthly sales to annual sales, so that part of it's very nice. Now, I made a mistake here. I'm going to fix it. I should not be putting those assumptions in there. I should have been putting them in this column over here, because we actually now need the month zero column here. Why do we need that? I mean, month zero is the time when the company's not even open yet. Well, there's a certain amount of food and beverage cost that you will incur in developing your menu and training your wait staff. And there's also a certain amount that you will incur in that period as we need to buy inventory to have it available for the first day of operations. And so, quite frankly, I'm just going to estimate that as being equal to 1 month's worth of value. Direct labor-wise, typically the cooks, the wait staff, and so forth, you might bring them in, maybe not for full shifts, but you're going to bring them in usually in the month before you open up for training and whatnot. And so, and you may bring them in during that period to kind of help get the place looking nice and so forth. So again, I'm just going to assume 1 month's worth of that. And those are formulas, but they're different assumptions really than the other stuff. So I'm going to highlight those a little bit in gray so that if we want to go back and revisit those, we can. And that's really it. And so now what we're doing is we're going to sum those up each period, and that's going to be our variable costs. And you're just going to extend this all the way out. And so you can see your variable costs are kind of high on an annual basis. You get on out. And then we're going to calculate our gross margin. Gross margin is equal to whatever your amount of sales are minus your variable costs. And so the easy way to think about this is this has how much money is left over. I don't like that formatting very much. Let's see if we can find, there we go. We'll just do it that way. Let's see, maybe there's a currency way to do it that's better. Nope, don't like that. Sorry, I'm very picky about trying to put stuff in. There we go, there's an accounting approach. It's got the dollar sign in front of it. Very picky about wanting to put stuff in a perspective where you can tell positives from negatives. So with that formatting, we'll just drag that on out. Okay, and we're going to get rid of the pennies, so there you go. All right, so one of the things you're going to notice is you have a negative gross margin in the first month. Well, actually in month zero, so before you ever open the doors. You're going to need to make sure that you have enough cash available to make payments for all of that, because it can't come out of revenue. You're also potentially going to notice, that these vary a lot, and so in terms of your gross margin, it's kind of up and down throughout that first period. You're probably going to want to again, think about what that variability is going forward. Really, that's all there is as it relates to the variable cost. I think that, again, probably the only other concept, just make sure you understand this notion of gross margin. The reason that we calculate gross margin very simply for businesses is so that we can think in terms of how much is left over after we paid our variable costs to pay our fixed costs. All right, we talked about that sort of at the outset of the class, and as you can see, when you're in ramp up stage here with your business, your cash flows coming out from gross margin may not be enough to cover all of those period costs. We haven't done those yet, but we will, and you just have to keep an eye on that. anyway, that is the simplest part of this, and so that's the variable cost piece, and hopefully that's useful for you. Thanks.